Hey, you guys, it is one of my favorite times of the year as we get to talk all about lives that were changed through the work of families like yours here in the States through Operation Christmas Child. Several years ago, when we first started working with OCC, I had no idea of the impact that these boxes were making in lives all around the world. And so I am so excited for you to hear really just a firsthand tell of that, as I am pleased to welcome Dania Yadago-Andreos, and she can correct me if I didn't get her name quite right.
You
But
got it right.
Dania's testimony, I am so excited for you to hear. So Dania, welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you, Lizzie, so much for having me. Excited to share with you about Operation Christmas Child.
Well, I am thrilled that you are here. Before we dive in, or I guess as we dive in, I would love for you to tell everyone a little bit of your story. I just Your life experience is so different than mine, so different than probably everyone listening in, that I it's fascinating to hear how God leads all around the world in so many different ways. So would you share that story with us?
Yes, I am originally from the Middle East, from a country that is uh, close to the gospel in a way that 98% were not believers or followers of Jesus. So just the fact that if you're a Christian living in that part of the world, you automatically would face a lot of persecution.
Mm,
So this is the environment that I come from that I think is very different than what we know and live here in the US, which we're very thankful for the freedom that we have. But just the fact that we couldn't have a church building legally, or we couldn't worship out loud, and now here we can, that put things into perspective.
yeah.
So that's where I come from. And then my family, while living in the Middle East, there were two major challenges that we faced. One of them being the persecution that my family faced because you were followers of Jesus. And the second one was severe poverty. And so I remember as in my early years growing up, my parents, even though they struggled, they they had one goal in their mind, which was to follow Jesus and to obey him and
Mm,
to please him. And that sometimes meant that you have to go against the culture, and that even means putting your life at risk for the sake of the gospel.
mm, wow.
And that was very impactful for me growing up.
Just watching them, I'm sure, live their lives out, live their testimony out. I can't imagine what kind of an impact that would make on the entire family. That's incredible.
Yeah, my parents, after they got married, they were actually not followers of Jesus, and they lived in my country. And Leslie, just not to confuse you, I come from. I usually will mention country one, country two, second country, third country, and the reason is because I cannot specify the country that
Yes.
I lived in, and also that Team Operation Christmas Child are actively serving there just for their safety. I will keep it to the Middle East, and
Yes, and
so.
and I appreciate that so much. And just to piggyback on that, there are believers living all around the world in countries that cannot be mentioned. You cannot use their real names. You cannot
Mm.
just their safety is so compromised all the time that we want to handle them carefully. And so I really appreciate your discretion in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for understanding. But my parents, after they got married and they gave birth to me and my brother, they didn't know what it meant to have a relationship with Jesus. So much so that country didn't have those resources that they actually had to leave my country, go to another country in the Middle East, and there they met a pastor who shared with them the gospel.
Mm,
Their eyes were opened, and they knew that this was something so precious that it's worth to give their whole lives into. And so
wow.
they gave their lives to Christ, and they decided that from that time on, not only they would be followers of Jesus, but they want to share their faith with others, and specifically going back to my home country and
Mm,
tell their own people about Jesus. And Leslie, I remember those times because as a child, even though I can't put all the dots together, but I remember specific events that happened that engrave in my memory. And I just remember that time when we went back to the village and started sharing the gospel, there was that sense of rejection.
mm,
that I felt coming toward us. I may not have understood it very well when we first moved back, but over the years, I understood that those people don't like us because we follow Jesus very firmly and very boldly. And just to give you an example of that kind of challenge that we face through persecution, I remember our closest relatives being against us, and they actually used to tell my father that if you continue believing what you believe in, then you are not going to belong to our family. We're going to
Wow.
just take our hands off of you, and you are not going to belong to us because you're bringing shame into our name. And when we started doing home meetings, because we could not have a church building, so we met at our house and we started sharing the gospel. And praise God, a lot of people did believe, and we were able to have those meetings at our house. But that also meant that our worship would be heard outside.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of people used to come and knock on the door and say, "You are being too loud and you're being so annoying and you need to stop it."
Wow.
Now, we knew that we could not stop. And my parents continued to tell people about Jesus, which led to series of persecution. Just to give you an example, one morning we woke up and we looked at the walls of the village, and all of them were filled with threatening phrases targeting my family.
Really?
Mhm.
Wow.
Now, some of those phrases used to say, for example, kick out the evangelist from our village, and they used to my dad's name specifically. Other ones used to say the specific way how they would kill my family if we did not stop telling people about Jesus or if we did not leave the village.
Hmm. Wow.
It was just one of those example of how that looked at. And then the other time I remember also was when my dad woke up in the morning. He went to his shop. He had a little shop to fix and sell watches. It wasn't very big, but that's all he could do to provide for us. And he went one morning and found that there was burned oil poured all over the front door of the shop, and there was a threatening letter posted on that door. And that letter said if we did not stop telling people about Jesus next time, they would burn the shop. So the oil marks were just a threat
Yeah.
or a warning. And they said that by that date, if you do not leave, we will come after you and those that come to your house, and you would regret the decision of following Jesus.
Wow.
Now, I remember that morning very, very well because I remember my dad's oil marks in his hands and talking to my mom.
Wow. And that is something that is just so foreign to our reality here by the grace of God,
Mm,
that I just want to give it a moment to marinate, because we read stories with our kids, with each other, of people in other lands, people historically who were persecuted. We study it in history, and yet we take for granted, or we don't understand that this is a modern day reality for just countless believers around the
mm,
world. And so I hope that as you're telling this story, that all of us are just sobered by the reality that we need to be praying for our brothers and sisters abroad in
mm.
ways that we probably have not been, but also we need to be so grateful and never take for granted the gifts and the freedom that God has given us here.
That's very true, Leslie. When I came to the US, I did have a huge cultural shock, just to see how a lot of people do take having churches and take worship
Yeah.
for granted. And, some people just don't know any different. And I think for me, the reason why I appreciate it more is because I know what it meant not to have it.
Right. Right. Well, you mentioned, or you alluded to, just the poverty and the struggle. Um, as your parents just seem to be such strong believers, I would imagine that they they were very prayerful in
Mm.
and in approaching their needs, and probably were pretty proactive in pointing out how God was meeting needs when he did. Can you tell us a little bit about that part of your story?
Yes, you hit it right on the head. My family, if I could summarize one word, would be a prayer for family.
Mm,
The second challenge other than persecution that my family faced was severe poverty. I do remember the room that we lived in. It was empty, it was old. We didn't have any furniture to sit on. Often we did everything on the floor. We didn't even have an actual bed. My mom used to bring those little sponges, put them on the floor, and that was what we were used to sleep on. We could not afford our daily food. I remember sometimes our dinner used to be raw onion and bread, because that's all what my mom could put before us. Everything I had was given to me from other people, and I remember often longing to have something just for me, something of my own that no one has used. But even though those situations was hard, and I'm sure it was even harder for my parents to see that their children have a need and they could not afford,
Right.
especially now that I am a mom and I have two children of my own. I now even more than ever understand the struggle of my parents of wanting to protect and care for their children. But what I love was that they never gave up on God in those situations, and they
Mm.
turned them into an opportunity to teach us that this is the time where we're going to trust the Lord and take him upon his word. If the Lord said that he will provide our needs, so we're going to sit together as a family, we're going to pray, and we're going to wait and trust that the Lord will answer those prayers. So my mom taught us how to pray as far back as I can remember. In fact, every night when she put us to sleep, she used to teach us how to pray and tell us, okay, talk to God like he's your friend and just tell him everything that's in your heart. So I often used to tell my mom, I want this, I want this, I want this. And it's basically the things that she could not afford, and
Right.
she was actually happy that I want to bring it to God in prayer. But I do remember a few things that I brought to God because I knew my parents could not afford for me. I prayed that God would send me toys of my own, and actually, there was a very specific need during that time in our life that we could not afford, and it was a need for the whole family. And
Mm.
that need was to have something as a radio to enable us to listen to a Christian radio station. I loved worship and music in my own language, but that was something very, very hard to get your hands into. And I heard there was a radio station that broadcast Christian radio and Christian music for only 2 hours a day. And to us, it would have been a big deal to put our hands on something like that. But the problem was, it was too expensive for us to buy something
Mm.
as a radio to help us listen to that. But being the family of prayer that trusted God with our needs, this was part of those need, and we just trusted the Lord, and we didn't know what was going to happen
Uh-huh.
until one very special day we went to that church gathering. And I just remember there were a lot of huge boxes up front, and a team came and they were doing worship songs and sharing the gospel. It was just an excitement filling the air. And as they finished with all of that, they opened those huge brown cartons and they started pulling beautifully wrapped boxes from inside
Mm.
those huge boxes. And I remember looking at those boxes and thinking, this is a real gift. This is what
Wow.
I have heard what a gift looks like. And we didn't know what was going to happen. They just started unpackaging those opening those big cartons and pulling the gifts. And then they started to call the children to come one by one and receive a beautiful briefly wrapped shoebox gift. When I was called to come up front, Leslie, I just remember my heart was beating so fast. It almost felt like it was going to explode because I had never received a gift before.
Wow.
This was my very first time, and it felt like a dream. I could not believe that I can actually receive my very first gift ever. My birthday wasn't celebrated. We didn't receive gifts on Christmas, so this was it. This was the first time. So when I received my beautifully wrapped shoebox, I remember the wrapping was so beautiful and colorful, and I wanted to just dig inside and see what's inside of it. And finally, we couldn't open it right there in the event. We had to wait until we got home. So my family sat together in that empty room. I mean, just if you can picture with me, it's a room that's dull, old, had no
Mm.
color, and in the middle, my family's sitting, and the only colorful things we had in that room were the shoe boxes that we received.
Wow. Wow.
And so we picked up those boxes. My brother received a box as well, and we finally opened the shoe box. And I remember when I looked inside, what shocked me the most, it was just so beautifully put together. It was so colorful. Everything was brand new, and it smelled so good. I cannot
Ah,
beat the
I
smell.
love that.
So I pulled school supplies. I loved the decorated pencils I received. They had little candy cane in them, little Christmas tree, and that stood out to me because I had never seen pencils that were decorated.
Oh,
And I just thought, wow, actually somebody spent time decorating that pencil just for me. So I love that pencil. I received hygiene items. My favorite was a toothbrush because sometimes we had to share the same toothbrush
mm.
with other members of my family, but now we get to have one just for me, and that was so special. And I received beautiful toys, which was an answer to my prayers. And what stood out to me the most was a beanie baby,
Oh,
and I loved it because it was new, it smelled good, and it was so cuddly at night. I often used to tuck it to bed with me when I slept.
oh,
So that was very special. And another item that I received was a slinky.
fun.
It was so fun to figure out how to play with it. I didn't know it was a toy at first. I thought it
Yeah.
was a bracelet. So
I
yeah,
always used mine as bracelets anyway. So,
and it's good because I used to wear it. I'm like, whoa, that's a bit heavy because mine
I
was
know.
metal. But eventually, my brother and I realized that this actually can go down the stairs on its own, and it was just so neat to have this unfold and learn the toys that we received because we had never seen such things, and some things we still don't know what how to play with them, but it was the fun of exploring what to do with these toys. Like my brother received monkeys in a barrel, for example,
Oh,
and we were just thinking, how do you play with this specifically? It was just so fun trying to figure out how to how to make it fun for both of us.
mm.
But Leslie, as you were going through those items, there was a big surprise for my family. There was a small box inside the shoebox, and as we pulled this box out and we opened it, we could not believe the item that we found because there was a mini, fully functional radio.
Wow. Hmm.
And I remember my mom's face. She was so surprised. It was this a moment of silence, of shock. And we were just thinking, how is it possible that out of million of shoeboxes and million of children, for that to come just to my family with the things that we needed and had prayed for? It's only possible because there was a divine orchestration
Yes.
by our amazing God. And I think the excitement of my parents wasn't just the excitement of receiving a radio that my family needed, but they knew that this was the moment with their children learned a very important lesson, which is a lesson of trusting God with all of our needs and even our wants. And if God knows that what's good for us, He will answer those prayers. And truly, till this day, if I ever have any kind of need and even want, I do bring it to God. And I know that at the right timing, and if it's God's will and He thinks it's good for me, He will answer and He will provide.
Yeah, that is such a strong testimony of learning provision, learning how God's good sovereign hand is in all, even the small things. As a child,
Yeah.
you clearly have never forgotten that God cares about even the little things. And that is such a powerful, life altering lesson that you were able to learn as a little girl because someone elsewhere was faithful and careful in packing a box and sharing with others. For those of you that are just listening to the podcast, I encourage you to go find the video. I want everyone to see the joy and the light in Dania's eyes as she was telling that entire story. You could just see the way that that had impacted her over and over as she told it, her eyes. I encourage you to go watch the video. That was as moving as her words, to just see the authenticity coming out on her face. But yeah, it is amazing to me, and I've heard this over and over again. A couple of things. Number one, it's hard for us here to imagine never having received a gift. It's hard for our children to even fathom it because they are lavished with gifts. And over as I've talked to shoebox recipients through the years, this was their first gift. This was the only thing that they had ever been given that was remotely like this. And you alluded to it a little bit, but would you tell me again, just kind of work this out for us. As someone who had never received a gift, what was the impact just on your little girl mind and heart of actually receiving that, knowing someone somewhere thought enough of you to give you that gift?
I didn't know where the shoeboxes came from, but I just remember thinking, who is that person that was so thoughtful enough that knew I needed things like this?
Yeah.
Who is that person who cared enough, and especially coming from living in a society where I was rejected for my faith, even in
Hmm.
school. Teachers and students used to reject me because I was the only follower of Jesus in my entire school. And so at that time, I just felt rejection from everybody around me. And just to see that God showed me that I am loved and accepted through a shoebox gift because somebody cared enough to do that. It was life changing for me. I remember Leslie just feeling in that moment that as though God's arm just wrapped all around me, and I felt so seen by Him. Just like the
Wow.
story from the Bible in Exodus in Genesis 16 about the slave named Hagar, and she was mistreated and she left in the wilderness, and she wondered if anybody sees her, and that's when God appeared to her and encouraged her, and she gave a name to God, El Roy, which means
Mm.
the God who sees. And that story resonates with me because I felt the same way. I was in that wilderness. I wondered if anybody cared, even if God cared for the need that we have, for the rejection that I was going through. And yet, He chose me to receive that shoebox gift with all that orchestration, because all that time when I was wondering, He was preparing that man or woman or child to pack that shoebox with the things that I needed and had prayed for, to show me that yes, I am the God of details and I am the God who cares
Mm.
for you.
Yeah, amazing. And that box had been packed several months in advance of you receiving it too,
Yes.
which again, you recognize how God is at work always, even when you have no idea that He is, even when you feel unseen, unknown, unheard. God never leaves you. He is at work, and he can do things that we would never even think to ask for. And
Yeah.
I love that very specific example of all of those things that you're able to share with us now. That's just it's amazing, and it's encouraging to me. So I appreciate your sharing it.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure, and I hope that it comes through how not only it seems like very simple items, but for those that don't have any, or they've never seen that, or they're struggling, God can use it to show them His character, and that's why
Yeah.
these boxes are so important beyond just the items inside.
Yeah, absolutely. How did you get from the Middle East to the States? You have, a very good English. So clearly you've been here for a little while. Can you tell us a little bit about how God led you in that transition?
After living for a while in the Middle East and sharing the gospel, the country situation, the government uh, was corrupt, and it was very difficult for my family to make it by. But with every persecution we received, we always prayed if God wants us to leave,
Mm.
and over, and there was not yet, not yet, not yet. And then that last time in 2009, we asked the Lord for one last time, is that your will for us to leave? And we got very clear confirmation, just miraculously, things being provided, God opening door for us to leave the country and go to a third country in the Middle East and apply as refugees. Now that process was very difficult on by
Mm.
itself, because you have to leave your country, with only a couple bags, and you have to wait as a refugee. You have to apply. You have to wait for your turn and do multiple interviews, and then pray that a door will open and you can find a new home. And so for my family, only by God's grace, we were able to get accepted to United States. And we came here in 2010 and made the United States our home. And I remember coming here, we thought those confirmations we heard from the Lord were the final ones, but there was one more thing that God allowed us to witness when we arrived to the US, to be sure that it was His will for us to leave the country. And that was after coming to the US, that same village that we lived in, we were sharing the gospel, was all taken and destroyed by extreme terrorist groups.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
And we were just thinking, if we did not leave at the right time, I would not be here. My family would not be here. But God
Yes.
saw this day coming. It was literally a day when those groups went into the village, and um, they killed whoever they could kill, and those who could flee, they did. And it became a ghost town. And we were just thinking, wow, what's amazing is that God saw all that coming, that He allowed those years for the gospel to be shared with those people. So they will get a chance to hear those people,
Wow.
and the children there were able, some of them were able to receive the shoe boxes, and they heard the gospel that way as well.
Right.
And
Right.
like this is not all a coincidence. God had a plan, and all of that happened right before that day, so people will get a chance to hear about Jesus.
And those seeds that were planted, God can do so much for or with them, especially in times of fear and anguish and just
Right.
the difficulties that come in a scenario that you just described. And that's another element of the ministry of Operation Christmas Child that I think that
Mm.
we don't talk about enough, is just those seeds that are planted through the discipleship that is done, both when they present the boxes, but also in the 12, 14, whatever weeks that follow. That is planting seeds that God will use. His word does not return void. And so as we read of things happening around the world that are so difficult to hear of, a lot of times Operation Christmas Child has gone in before, just like with your village, and planted seeds of the gospel that by his grace will take root and really carry people through unimaginably difficult times.
I agree. I agree. And you mentioned that 12 lesson discipleship program, which is one of my favorite things about Operation
Hmm.
Christmas Child. Just to tell you that, like, the shoebox is given, they don't just end up, they don't just give the shoe boxes and they leave, but they follow up with a discipleship program that actually started in 2009. And here is what blows my mind. Since 2009, over 50 million children were enrolled,
Amazing.
and half of that, 25 million children, made decision to accept Jesus.
Hmm.
Now, I don't know who has a 50% success rate from sharing the gospel, but this is pretty incredible to
That's
have,
amazing.
50% of them do give their lives to Jesus, and it all starts from a simple shoebox gift.
That anyone can participate in this ministry. And what I love about it, I do, my favorite part of what they do is the greatest journey. I love that follow up and that well trained, disciplined, very well thought out discipleship that they do with all of those children. The My second favorite thing about it is that anybody can participate in this ministry, and it is such a great way to get your children actively engaged in ministry. Because when my kids were little, it was an event in our house to go out and start searching for the different things that we wanted to put in the shoe boxes that we were packing. And the kids often would come up with themes that they wanted to go with it, but it was theirs. They took ownership of it. And so as they were packing these, as they were sending it abroad, as we were praying for the children that would receive it, that was their ministry. And huh, the impact of that stateside on our families is really, really powerful too.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want that to be lost. And I hope and pray that as you who are listening in, that your hearts will be challenged at how God can use you and your children in this ministry, impacting lives like you would have never ever imagined. If you'll just take the time to participate. Plus, it's a lot of fun. So, Dania, I'm so grateful for your story. I'm so grateful for your telling it. Can you tell us when the collection times are, and how can families learn more if they've never packed a shoebox, if they've never participated in this ministry? Give us a little idea of how families can participate and kind of what is coming up this fall, which would be more specific on how they can get involved.
Yeah, so you mentioned that anybody could pack a shoebox, which is the fun of it because literally anybody could do that.
Yep.
So if it's taken a standard shoebox gift, sorry, shoebox. If you buy shoebox shoes and you just want to use the box, you could do that, standard size box, or on our website, SamaritansPurse.org/OCC. You can go there, and if you can order boxes as well. And if you're watching from the video, the boxes looks like this. And so you can, there's multiple ways to get those boxes, and you fill them with hygiene items, school supplies, toys, and what we call a wow item. Like, for example, my wow item was the radio. And
Mm-hmm.
but honestly, don't be limited to that. Like, don't go and put radios in every shoebox. You could do that if you want to. But you could put like a soccer ball, a doll, something that just the child would say wow. And then we during the third week of November this year, I believe it's November 18th to 25th. So the third week of November, drop-off locations open all over the country, and you can find the closest drop-off location by going to our website as well. Type your zip code, and they'll tell you, hey, down 1 mile or 2 miles, you have this church. You can just simply go, drop your boxes, pray over them, and you will be done. And then the ministry will take care of the rest of that. So it's very simple and fun to do.
Yeah. Well, that is awesome. Dania, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate your time and your willingness to share with us. It's been an absolute privilege to talk to you.
You as well. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you're welcome. And to everyone else who's listened in, I am sure this has been challenging for you. I hope that it's been encouraging. I honestly, I hope that it's been awe-inspiring at how God uses such simple things, simple acts by his people to so profoundly impact others in his name, and how he is always at work. He answers prayers. Even when we cannot see him, our God is at work because he cares about his children so, so very much. So I hope that this has been a blessing to you. I cannot encourage you strongly enough to pack shoe boxes. You know, in our family, we would do, I had 2 boys and 2 girls. So, you know, we did 2 boy boxes, 2 girl boxes. Everybody got to do their own, um, really pick the age group, pick exactly what they wanted to put in there. It was something that my kids were able to take ownership of. And this was part of their ministry, even when they were young, and just helping our children understand their role in the body of Christ while they're young gives them a foundation for service for the rest of their life. I can't overstate how important that is to a missional, discipleship focused parent. So go connect with Operation Christmas Child. I'll give you all the links, all the dates in the show notes. But it is a great organization to partner with. And I am so thankful that we've had the privilege to do so for years, and for all of the thousands and thousands of shoe boxes that you guys have packed. I hope that we can blow that number out even more this year. So have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to talking to you again real soon.